to admit, I like the idea of the rebirth ceremony. It's the kind of thing I'd probably go ahead and do in my real life, if I had the availability to do so. Seems kind of fun. A veritable array of amusement. Or whatever it is Londo said about it. This is an interesting episode. It's the kind of thing that's pretty much mandatory when it comes to fiction. You need a breather. You've just had these big, massive, impacting events that just barely survived. And what is effectively a three-parter. Now we need to all take a moment and go, okay, catch our breath. Catch our breath. Let's take a moment. What I like, though, is that most of the episode goes out of its way to acknowledge and recognize the changes that have happened. If you don't know what I mean by that, there's been many times, this isn't really the kind of problem that happens nowadays, but back in the day, television shows might actually occasionally do this big status quo changing thing. And then by the time the status quo changing thing ended, the next episode after that would basically be business as usual. That happened a lot, and it used to drive me batty. So I did really appreciate when all of a sudden this episode's like, yeah, no, the events of the previous episode not only actually happened, but they frickin' mattered. It's something I appreciated, and I really do like that about Babylon 5 in general. So let me go over the obvious thing really quick. Yes, that was Harlan Ellison as the AI. It was pretty much done for humorous effect. If I was feeling unkind, I would say the Harlan Ellison stuff doesn't fit in the episode. But actually it does. If you really sit back and think about it. In my perspective, it fits for the same reason I already mentioned. It's a breather. It's there to add a little bit of humor, a little bit of lightheartedness to what is actually a fairly serious and dark episode overall. And an episode that discusses romances, which is why we've got this background going on today. The romance episode. There's two that come into the forefront, and one that is very vaguely hinted at in the background, which doesn't really matter. But so, for me, the idea of including something like the Harlan Ellison AI, I'm with that. And it did make me laugh several times, especially the scene where Garibaldi is just standing there. Doesn't say a word. The gentleman, he does these acting perfectly, just pulls out his gun, shoots the speaker, pieces of the speaker fall in front of the camera. Then he just goes back to it like, yep, everything's better now. So I've got, my notes are kind of all over the place. A lot of stuff happens in this episode, so it's hard to talk about it linearly. Linearly, get it? No. I like the funeral scene. It reminds me of one of my favorite quotes in human history about we are made of star stuff and the fact that we now send our troops into the stars themselves. And I also like the fact that they made an effort in the writing to make sure that several different, obviously varied nationalities were present in the names of the people who died. It's another nice touch, kind of pushing that into the background. It's not the kind of thing you're really supposed to notice. It's just there to kind of add to the overall idea of Earthers and EarthGov and humanity rather than Chinese or American or whatever. I also like it, and I've noticed this before. Obviously, this is the episode where Sheridan finally admits to Delenn that he has significant amorous feelings for her. And that is actually the thing he admits to her as his part of the ceremony. But what I like about that is that that's been built up significantly over quite a bit of time. I've been pointing it out as we go. And the fact that she keeps calling him John with a degree of warmth and familiarity that really helps add to the fact that the two of them are close regardless of amorous feelings. Again, the thing that I keep pushing when it comes to relationships in fiction. It can't just be about, bedtime, right? There's a couple of scenes that I really like in this episode that I don't have much to talk about. Londo's scene with Delenn, where Delenn says, you were the first person that it occurred to me to bring to this. That makes perfect sense to me, not only from her perspective, but why he says no. Because from his perspective, it's not as though he doesn't need a rebirth. It's not as though he doesn't acknowledge that there needs to be something new. It's that he's already been taking steps to that. Remember, he's already gone out of his way to separate himself from Mr. Morden in the Shadows. And he has now taken further steps to try and separate Centauri from the Shadows. He feels he's already done his rebirth ceremony. He feels like he has already taken part in this. I don't need your thing to do it for me. I will do it for myself. Thank you very much. And then G'Kar's, of course, is also interesting. You'd think an already growing spiritual leader, who is someone who was spiritual to begin with, had a very strong belief system, would be all in favor of this. But the thing is, all of that is secondary to what G'Kar really is, which is about action, doing, the actual results of action. G'Kar is very busy right now, and he is actively running around keeping the station safe. He is running the Narn security forces who, I remind you, not only just went through a pitched battle, but just lost a lot of their own people. So, from his perspective, and JMS himself commented on this, G'Kar is already doing his rebirth thing. Which is funny, because if you think about it, both G'Kar and Londo have already had their rebirth as of now. Let's talk about Londo really quick. Londo's scene with Refa is brilliant. It is merely another step in Londo's story, but it is another step in Londo's story, and well done for that. It shows how Londo is not just... How do I put this? I'm going to start with a segue. Please forgive me. I'm going to mention Legend of Zelda here, okay? There are two functional Ganondorfs that matter with regards to personality and character within the Zelda mythos. The one in Twilight Princess and the one in Wind Waker, okay? Don't pull any technicalities. Those are the two that matter with regards to their characterization. Thing is, they could not be further apart. I'm not just talking about visually, they are completely different characters. The difference between the two is one of them understood what it was like to rise up to the heights of victory and then to fall to the depths of defeat. That's the Wind Waker one. That Ganondorf went through highs and lows, and that perspective it added to him made him basically a more well-ranged character, someone who was not completely cacklingly evil. By contrast, the Twilight Princess Ganondorf, he didn't even start. He was just like, and now I will, and then he was stopped, and then he was imprisoned. He never got a chance to grow, basically. Now, I'm not saying that he should have had that chance or that he should have been forgiven for what he was about to do. My point is, though, he was made worse by what happened. He descended into total cackling maniacalness, a true level of malevolence and malice that he had never actually had before, because he was never allowed to see both sides of the perspective. Londo has been high, low, and high again, actually, throughout the course of his career. He is currently probably one of the most powerful people in the Centauri Republic, overall, just in terms of political affluence. That's in addition to his extensive experience, the power of his house and his name, the contacts he has from the old days and the ones that are still honored therewith, the significant amount of intel information he has, not only thanks to his post, but thanks to all his experience, his understanding, his skill of how Centauri politics works. Lord Refa is technically stronger politically, but in a more direct way. Lord Refa has the ear of the Emperor, and Lord Refa has the ability to push the Emperor into given directions. And that is actually it. It's just more obvious sweeping changes can be done with that kind of power, rather than the far more manipulative, behind-the-scenes power that Londo has. Lord Refa's also never lost. You see why I brought up that comparison earlier to Ganondorf. See, Refa is the Twilight Princess Ganondorf. He has never actually had that experience of perspective, of wisdom, of learning and experience. Londo? He's been around the block more than once at this point. And it is interesting to me, the variation between the two and how they are presented. Because you'll notice, if you're paying attention, Londo actually offers Lord Refa a chance to change his mind willingly, offers his own perspective on it, and he gives the reasoning that has changed his own mind. Londo certainly loves personal power. Absolutely. I shouldn't say it like that because I have my own term for what personal power means. So let me strike that from the record. Londo loves being powerful. Londo is selfish. He likes taking care of himself. But there is something that supersedes that, and that is his belief in his duty, his loyalty, his responsibility to the Centauri people and the Centauri Republic. And Londo is experienced enough to know the difference between those two things. Refa only cares about himself. This will be part of Refa's story arc. He's going to be showing up a couple more times in the next several episodes. Not immediately, but through the course of this season. And it'll help to inform where Londo's character arc is currently moving. Again, as I mentioned earlier, Londo already feels like he has been reborn. He is currently trying to now damage control all the crap that he unleashed. So he approaches Refa and says, "You will do this because because this will help the Centauri." And he offers the consolation of this, and he offers this thing, and Refa's like, ha! Refa quite literally laughs at him. And then Londo says, "Okay, I poisoned you, and I intend to keep this poison over your head like an axe." It ultimately shows the most striking difference between the two men. Lord Refa can't see beyond the bridge of his nose. He insists that this... There's an earlier scene in a previous episode where Londo says, "I never wanted the throne. I don't want to be emperor. Too dangerous, too obvious. Better to be safer, hidden behind the throne." Lord Refa proudly proclaims, in an open area, I feel like adding, his desire to be on the throne himself. I think that really helps to highlight the difference between the two men in one nice way there. Lennier. Lennier is an interesting character in general. I've heard a lot of theories about Lennier across the series and across the years since the series has come out. Almost all of these theories agree that there's more to Lennier than it appears. No intended alliteration. The idea being that there's something additional there to just the kid who's like, ah. Now, I don't buy into most of the he's secretly Machiavellian theories I've heard, but what I do think is that he kind of does the same thing that Veer does in his character arcs, how he goes from this bumbling, little apprentice person to basically being a wise and complex individual in their own right. I also think Lennier... How do I put this? I think Lennier's a Vulcan. Hear me out. I think Lennier is sufficiently prideful, not just in himself, although he does have some of that, but I mean in his species. He clearly espouses the Minbari to be superior, almost matter-of-factly, kind of like a Vulcan would. And he adheres to that pride in many of his interactions with other races. He always draws a clear line. He's done this before, and he does it in this episode. I wrote it down. We, no matter how much we look alike, we are not you. Making it clear the difference between human and Minbari. And he does this several times, and this will come up in the future as well. So he looks at himself and other Minbari as if they are just naturally superior, as if they should just be the ones in charge. And on many occasions, he goes out of his way not to give his personal opinion on matters, because his personal opinion is that one, the prideful Minbari superiority perspective. And there's other layers to it. I'm simplifying, of course. Because in relation to this episode, what we also see in Lennier is also kind of Vulcan. The fact that he has a lot of self-discipline. The fact that he reins in all of that. In fact, the mere fact that he allows himself to basically say something so blatant to Marcus shows how emotionally distraught he is in this episode. How much it's bothering him that Delenn has been kidnapped and her life is threatened. Because he allows himself to say that kind of a thing to someone else. He loses control, just for a moment. And then he goes ahead and confesses his love. And that's an interesting comment. JMS himself has gone on record of saying that Lennier's comment was intended to be taken at face value. I can't bring myself to do so. It seems to fit his character arc, and this is going into the future as well, too perfectly for him to not mean what he said. You know, my love is beyond romantic love. My love is a higher, more perfect form of love. That doesn't seem in keeping with his character for me. What I think is keeping in his character for me is that he thinks his love is a higher, more perfect form of love. That he thinks he has a superior form of feelings, of love for Delenn than anyone else might have, cough, Sheridan, cough. That he thinks he would be better suited for her than anyone else would be. Again, no spoilers, but I think a lot of you who've seen this show kind of see where I'm going at with that perspective. I think that's what he tells himself. And so, that is the lie he tells himself, which he also opens up to Marcus in a fit of weakness. Speaking of Marcus, Marcus is awesome in this episode. This is probably, I'd say, the first episode that really starts to peel back the layers on Marcus. Not that I'm saying he hasn't had characterization before now, nor am I saying that he has had, a bad screen time or anything like that. It's just that this episode really pauses, like stops the camera for a moment on Marcus and says, look, here, look at this. I'm speaking metaphorically. Because Marcus very much has a form of survivor's guilt. Delenn just hits the nail on the head. You have to forgive yourself for the fact that you continued living. Actually, I wrote down how she phrased. Where is it? Excuse me. You have to forgive yourself for being alive. That's how she phrases it. That informs so much of his character. Look at how he reacts to her saying that, by the way. Look at just how much it hits him, and the fact that he clearly wants to keep going, and then they are interrupted. Marcus feels worthless. Marcus feels like he is the other one, that his brother was the one who was really going to accomplish things, that he was allowed to be a layabout, and someone who never accomplished anything with his life, because the rest of the people around him, friends, family, all had that covered. Then, as he himself put it, everyone else died, and he was the only one left. Why me? I'm the detritus. I'm the vestigial one. I shouldn't be allowed to exist. Their lives should have been spared. Their lives should have been allowed to keep going forward. What the hell's the point of me? I don't matter. And we see why Marcus has pushed himself so damned hard back at the Minbari and during his time on Babylon 5. Why he never lets up. Why he never pulls himself back. Why he's always got that intensity to him. He has to constantly try to make up for that. Try to, not to prove, but to be worthy of the sacrifice that was made, willingly or otherwise, so that his miserable, worthless life could keep being. It's easy to sympathize with that kind of mindset, at least for me. I also like it because pretty much the next scene after that is that Marcus pushes himself again, even harder than he had before. I know that everyone thinks it's an awesome and badass scene when he's like, 5 minutes, I'll be the only one standing at the table, and then 5 minutes, I'll be the only one standing at the bar. And it is an awesome scene, especially since he was 100% correct about it, unless you pull a technicality about Lennier, which I'm not going to. But I mention that because that shows Marcus really trying, completely going way beyond what he already had been doing in order to really showcase the kind of effort he can put into things. He took down an entire bar of people, some of whom are fairly experienced and strong individuals, by himself. Also, my favorite Marcus quote comes from this episode, which I wrote down. You can get more with a kind word and a 2x4 than you can with a kind word. So true. You notice I haven't really talked much about the main plot. It's because it's not really a big deal for this one. As weird as that sounds. The main plot it actually does a good thing writing-wise. It serves as a structure on which the meat, the branches and the leaves of the episode can be constructed on. But not a lot of focus is done on it directly, nor do I think it should have been. So I don't think that's a weakness writing-wise. But I do very much like how it leaves a couple of questions unanswered. For example, why are these people loyal to Night Watch? There are many reasons to be loyal to an organization like Night Watch. The most obvious one being personal gain. Night Watch was a way of advancing one's career. Even Zack was not immune to that idea. There's also the possibility that they are afraid. We know for a fact, or possibly in the future, that several aspects of the military are only loyal because they are afraid of what will happen to them and their families if they are not. Loyal to the Clark regime, I mean. Then there's the possibility of people who are, well, there's no nice way to put this, who are xenophobic. People who are very anti-alien. I wouldn't even be surprised if several of those people don't like what Clark and his people are doing, but, and I'm just can you picture them saying the words, but at least he's doing about something about the damn alien problem. Could you picture one of them saying that? I've heard people say similar things in real life over the last 20 years. So, I found myself analyzing that and trying to figure out the motives of the characters. And after some real thinking, the two main characters, that we've got the guy who is he's literally listed as Sniper, he's never given a name, and the guy with the scar. By the way, real scar. A lot of people keep asking, what's with the fake scar? No, the actor really had that real scar. Go figure. The guy with the scar is the one that's a little bit more of a puzzle to me. He seems like the kind of person who would be in this for the politics, for the personal gain, the one who's willing to think about what it could do for us rather than any cause. And yet, at the same time, he never even implies anything in that direction. Instead, he's constantly talking about the bigotry angle, basically. Screw the Minbari, death to the aliens, blah, blah, blah. So my question to you is, do you think he was actually a political activist who was trying to use bigotry as a way to get his own ends? Or do you think he was actually just an anti-alien person himself? But that brings me to the guy with the sniper. The way he's presented, it could be assumed that he is a psychotic, a literal psychopath. And that is kind of what they actually say flat out in the episode. But I don't think that's true. There's enough hints there, and we've seen this in the series before, that he's probably someone who was broken by the Minbari War. He may or may not have been a decent person before that, but there's no doubt whatsoever that he was a much, much worse person after the war. Just like it happened to so many other characters within this very show, many of whom we've seen on camera. And I also like the fact that he is just enough self-aware to recognize that. Not to do anything about it, just to be cognizant of it. There's this brilliant scene where Delenn basically says, I pity you. I pity you for the way you are and for the fact that you are alone. And he says, screw it, and goes to kill her. Out of what is effectively spite or anger or hatred. And what I find most interesting is when the guy comes in, Scarface comes in and stops us. Are you mad? His response is, maybe. Ask her. The way he says that is very interesting. Like, the idea is something that has truly occurred to him. Like, he's actually considering that he might be mad. It's just not going to prevent him from being mad. It's a surprising subtlety for a character who literally is not given a name. Let me check my notes here. I like the rebirth ceremony. We learn some... Well, I shouldn't say that. We don't actually learn anything. It's more about emphasizing what these characters have been keeping hidden to themselves, that is what they end up giving away during the rebirth ceremony. The fact that Franklin admits he's got a problem, even though he has done everything in his power to deny that. The fact that Ivanova admits that she loved Talia, or at least felt like she loved Talia. The fact that Sheridan admits that he loves Delenn, or is beginning to love Delenn. It's a nice scene. It's very powerful. The one that hits me the most is Garibaldi. The fact that he's afraid all the time. It's been said that Garibaldi is a paranoiac. I don't think that's actually true. I think he is borderline paranoiac, but I think Garibaldi... Well, I think it's right there on the tin, really. I think he's afraid. I think he is always afraid that if he doesn't do things just right, things will go bad. And I think at least part of the reason he feels that way is because that's exactly what's happened to him in his life more than once. So, at the end of the episode, Delenn gave them a gift. And as it actually happens, it turns out Delenn had a gift for me, too. Since I can't wear my old uniform anymore either. Thought I'd get a new one. So I hope you will be joining me the next few seasons. I'll see you around, guys.